Hello and welcome back to the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. I am your host, Michael Stamatinos. And if you're new to us, man, we're really excited to have you here because we're bringing some pretty insightful conversations, exciting conversations with leaders who are painstakingly shaping the future of healthcare. And we happen to be really passionate around healthcare innovation and adoption and things like access and leadership. And if it's your first time tuning in, let me just tell you a little bit about what we're trying to do here. So we're focused on bringing real stories of innovation to life. So the aim is highlighting real people, people that are truly innovating within the space, and just giving them the platform to be able to share their story, share what they're working on, not only just the wins, some of the learnings, and share it with our community and ultimately share it with the world. So we've got an amazing action-packed year with just some incredible, incredible folks that are coming onto the show. If you haven't already, and make sure you hit the subscribe button so that any new interviews that are coming on come right into your inbox. So our field, it's always evolving, it's always moving pretty quickly, and it's crucial to have leaders that can envision a different, brighter future, that are embracing innovation and addressing some of these pressing challenges. And our next guest on the show is actually one of these leaders, and I'm super excited. So let's give a warm welcome to Annika Lundström, the dynamic CEO of Reminded. They're a cutting edge company based in San Francisco that's pushing the boundaries of how we understand mental health. So Annika and her team at Reminded, they're working on some incredible tech, and we'll talk about it more later, that really analyzes saliva to spot signs of stress and depression early on. But Annika, she's not just about business and science. She's also a former youth Olympian in table tennis. Her journey from the sports arena to the lab and the boardroom, it's a story of passion, dedication, and drive to make a difference. So we get to talk to Annika today, where she can share some of her innovative work, her journey, how she's helping shape the future of healthcare. So Annika, welcome to the show. It's great to see you. How are you?
Thank you, Michael, so much for that kind introduction. I really appreciate it and for having me on. I'm really looking
Yeah.
forward to this conversation. It will be good to talk about.
Yeah. So let's start a little bit about your journey into healthcare. Can you walk us through the moment that you decided to start Reminded, and what was the catalyst that shifted your thinking from conception to, okay, now we need to start executing?
For sure. Yeah. Well, I think like overall, I've always had a very like curious mindset in general, trying to seek for a deeper meaning behind things and also unlock certain new levels of my own potential. So I think like being in this space really has resonated with me on many levels for sure. But the like main trigger for me, like how I saw that this is something that I really want to dedicate my life towards is when I started like digging deeper within the space and did a lot of research about like what kind of innovations and sensors were already coming out. And then I, at the end of each like article, always saw like this would be great for like a commercial application. The technology is getting ready to a place where we actually can make a difference to detect these kinds of things and make sure that remote health checkups can be done in a much easier way than ever before, which is then just like sparked that in whole inspiration for me. Like, well, okay, well, let's try this and try to gather together like excellent individuals within the space and take it further from just like an idea to something much more tangible. And it's been an incredible journey so far. I've been working on this now for 1.5 years, and yeah, we'll go probably into more detail about where we are right now, but it's definitely been something that I'm really happy that I took the leap of faith for so far.
Yes, I mean, so you had to physically transition, from Finland to where you are now. What was the deciding factor? What made you think that, okay, I need to get to Silicon Valley? And has that notion of making that choice, how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, so well, the foundation of our startup was from Finland, as you said. Worked on it for maybe like a year from like the ideation phase to something a little bit more stable. But then when it came to the like new phase of trying to get like funding and well, gaining various resources around us, I just recognized that within the space that we are, it is quite challenging to get yourself up on the feet. And
Yeah.
especially being in the hardware business, that already requires, a significant amount of money to get the like concept actually like working. So why I'm currently now located in San Francisco was that I came across this excellent opportunity that the Finnish government has set up where they give the chance to a few like rising and upcoming founders to be dropped in the Bay Area for basically like a 3 months period so that they pay the accommodation and you try to grab as many like different possibilities for yourself as possible. And I just saw the difference in terms of the pace of how things can actually move forward, the decision making, and just being surrounded by that kind of environment where a lot of people are, working constantly on like self-improvement and trying to pursue something that is way greater than themselves was just the kind of tipping point for me to like, okay, like I need to relocate here for a longer term. And that's what I did now during this year. And I'm really happy that I did. So yeah.
Amazing that they gave that level of opportunity to give someone some runway. 3 months, it's a quarter, right? So you get the sprint for a quarter. You basically do a year's work in 3 months. Is what it basically means. So you can get a little bit more runway. Curious around just sort of shifting gears about Reminded. Talk about, where you guys are today. Can you share a little bit about the product? And, because, mental health it's somewhat of a stigmatized, field in medicine. I want to sort of talk a bit about that and how you're changing
Definitely.
that.
Yes. So in a nutshell, Reminded is a medical device startup developing a piece of hardware being able to detect cortisol through a saliva test. It is all based on a biosensor that our chief scientific officer's whole PhD work is the foundation of it based on. And yeah, where we are right now, completed our first funding round, which we publicly announced now a couple of months ago, have progressed to a point where we're setting up a clinical trial now that would be taking place in Q1 of 2025. And yeah, overall, our US exposure has expanded quite rapidly now, which is really great since, that has been definitely like a learning curve to become accustomed to a really different environment when it comes to healthcare. But the overall reason of why we're developing this specifically for mental health care is that it's a space that still has significant like room for improvement when it comes to the general health assessment. So as most of us are quite accustomed to, the general decision making is based on subjective assessments when it comes to, like asking back and forth questions how people feel and then
Right.
prescribing medications and therapy based on that. So we want to take the industry from a more data-driven approach by providing an avenue of easy remote health checkups to that industry in a way that you don't have to send off your tests to like a laboratory to get your results. So we want to have that kind of continuous measurement of now starting out with cortisol to ensure that people can track that over time.
Now, is this something that is done, via a nurse, via physician? How are you thinking about the actual deployment of this?
For sure. So we're taking it from the like more institutional approach by having it implemented with those healthcare institutions who are already working for this cause. And since we're going down the whole regulatory pathway to get it approved by the FDA, then we ensure that we become a very reliable player within the space, and then we can have it more integrated into the healthcare system itself by having it reimbursed through insurance companies and so on. So that's the kind of tactical approach that we're taking.
So what, innovation it involves a lot of trial and error.
Yes.
And can you maybe share maybe a major challenge that you face, recently or one that you've just gotten through, well, as it pertains to kind of developing this tech and how did you overcome it?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
or
Well,
maybe you're still working through it.
yeah, it's a constant iteration process. I think that's the most important thing that you maintain open to different directions for your startup overall to ensure that the whole long-term strategy actually makes sense at the end of the day. So, well, when we started out fundraising, the whole device itself was quite different actually. So it had like a lot of features, a lot of extra things and like analytics and everything, but it just made the whole concept, first of all, very complex and then hard to sell. And the like first harsh feedback that I got was exactly that from many investors that I encountered during the springtime. But something that I would say that I was good at was to take in that constructive criticism in a way that I made sure to make it as simple as possible for people to understand first and foremost, and then also something that can later on be tweaked on and enhanced and advanced. So we simplified the concept significantly during the springtime, and that kind of innovative process made sure that we were able to secure the first funding for this round, I would say. So that's one of the like major hurdles I would say that I was able to overcome, just like mentally to detach myself from the first version of the device that I had in mind.
Yeah, it's hard when you've dedicated your life's work to something and someone critiques it. That takes a lot of mental fortitude to and humility to just say, okay, all right, let me just take that in versus getting defensive and trying to defend things and being combative. Um, where does that come from for you? Is does that come from your background as an athlete? That's that's not an easy thing to do. I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs. It's not
Mhm.
easy.
No, it's definitely not. And I would say that there is a good parallel to my background in sports. So as you introduced me, so I did table tennis for 13 years of my life, started when I was 6, and then uh, scaled it up to become a youth Olympian in it during the year of 2018. But I would definitely say that regardless if you're an athlete or trying to innovate within healthcare, you can't have all the answers when you start out. When you try to improve your skills from the ground up. So I would say that you have to have a level of curiosity and kind of throw your emotions out of the window for to some extent to be able to take in feedback from whether that be from a sports coach or from an investor who wants to write you a check.
Yeah.
But it takes some time. But something else is also that if you encounter a problem that a lot of people like are pointing out, most of the time, if they do have some extensive experience within the field that you're trying to target, they probably have some things to say. So then you have to take a step back and kind of like go back to the whiteboard and try to like see like what are some of the small changes that I can do to make this make more sense.
Yeah. What's been the process of creating a moat from a defensibility standpoint? What have you done, you and the team, from a patents perspective? Are there others that you're seeing in the space? Where did you see sort of this white space and say we need to attack this? Talk through the thinking and what you're doing there on the patent front.
Yeah, so this kind of saliva-based technology has definitely accelerated now after the whole hit with Corona and so on. People have become more accustomed to these kinds of remote ways of checking your health, which has been a good amplifier for our startup for sure. In terms of defensibility, there are definitely some other competitors within our space, which is only a good thing. None or very, very, very few have been coming like closer to commercialization, just due to the fact that taking something out of the laboratory to a commercial application is quite a big step. The kind of differentiator for us is the detection of cortisol. So most of the competitors are basing it on either colorimetry, aptamers, or then enzymes, but we're working with another nanotechnology that I probably can't like expose right here.
Yeah.
But that ensures that if we take it like out to the society and the kind of spaces that we want to work with, then it becomes more robust in terms of like temperature changes and pH and so on. So that's one thing. And as of right now, when we're stepping into like a bigger game with our competitors and so on, there have been some interesting interactions already with them, but I try to only allocate our focus towards like the pure development of us. because that's the thing that will move us forward, and not like focusing all of our energy and time towards the people who are surrounding us. So yeah.
Agree with you wholeheartedly. You need to focus inwardly right now, from that selfish standpoint. It's like, hey, what are we doing? What are we working on? What's going to get us to that next step, that next stage? How, as a CEO, how far out do you look? Just knowing what you have ahead of you. I mean, are you talking you're looking at months, years? How do you balance that out with the execution?
Mm. Uh, I definitely have like a long-term high-level goal in my mind, which is where we would be like in 5, 10 years. But how I try to approach, let's say, that level of execution is to truly break it down to what's tangible within the next year, and then breaking down those like major operations into smaller tasks month by month. And it's been working so far, kind of like backtracking that whole process from where we are now to where I would like us to be when we go to like towards commercialization, which in our trajectory right now would be like within maybe like a year or something. So yeah, I would
Mm,
say like the major hurdles and problems that you see that feel like very overwhelming, you just have to take those down to smaller tasks that feel much less intimidating. So
yeah. Is there is there like a piece of, I'm just curious, just because, as startups, you're seeking feedback, and is there been a piece of conventional wisdom within the startup world that you've received that you fundamentally disagree with or have chosen to ignore?
you mean like a general message that gets like spread
Yeah,
around?
has someone said like, "Hey, here's conventional wisdom," and then you're just like, Yeah, that doesn't resonate with me at all, and I'm just going to ignore it, and I'm going to keep plowing forward." Has there been anything that anyone has shared with you? And curious what that's been.
Um, I don't have like anything specific like on top of my mind when it comes to
Okay.
exactly that, but some of the like general principles when it comes to how people see startups in general, I don't resonate with, which is the maybe, or I try at least, let's say, when it comes to like female founders and in general, try to stay like more neutral to the subject in overall, because I've just come to notice that there are so many factors that are outside of my control, which is like how other people's perception is of me, or what's the first impression that they get when they go into a conversation with me. And I've come to notice that I may be approached in a certain way when those talks start out, but the only thing that will actually have any kind of effect is like the execution of your work and what you
Mm,
have been able to tangibly complete. So I think like most of those like first impressions gets quite easily like shut down when you're able to just, state out everything on the table that you're currently doing. And that's like my main focus to allocate my two eyes on the operations that I'm in control of.
yeah.
Then the rest
Yeah.
is someone else to decide. So
Yeah, they're it's signals and noise. Now, look, leading a startup, running a startup, it's quite consuming. How and I preface this by just saying that I've read a number of articles about startups folding, and I talked to a lot of founders that unfortunately have had to kind of wind down their operations. How do you manage work-life balance, and what advice do you give to other emerging entrepreneurs about maintaining their health, relationships, while also pursuing their aspirational and their business goals?
mm, something that I would consider quite hard to get is like a perfect balance when you really try to get something from the ground up, like up and running. Um, and for me personally, how I was able to take this out of just the like general idea phase into where we are today is that I promised to myself that I will dedicate a full year, taking away some of those like general enjoyments of life that a lot of people fall into, I would say, because
Hmm.
I would consider it to be more than fair to give yourself a very fair shot if you do commit to something like wholeheartedly. And that might require you to stay out from like social gatherings every weekend or not fall into those like routines like drinking or partying as much. And of course, like that kind of isolation is not very sustainable like in the long term, but for an extended period of time, that kind of focus is needed in order for you to truly take it to something more
Mm.
strong. And I've now come to notice that we're currently in a period where that amount of effort is not necessary for me anymore. But for a long time, like 1.5 years maybe, I gave up on a lot of things in order to make this come together for the place that we are now. And that required me even to, move away 8,000 kilometers from my family. But these are the necessary sacrifices that a lot of people maybe don't see straight up. But it's a challenge. But something else that I really want to highlight, however, is that I want to be a good advocate for what I put out, and specifically being within the space of like mental health. It would be quite ironic if I myself drive myself into insanity or like a burnout, and then like
Yes,
by my device, I'm very reliable. Um, so I've been very aware of trying to shut off everything now and then. So you find happy and balanced life outside of the startup itself because you can't value your whole foundation as a human based on how much funding you can get in. So yeah,
that's
it's very
right.
important to find some enjoyment outside of your startup.
I'm curious if you and the team have been, measuring your cortisol levels throughout this journey. What's
Uh,
that been like?
I haven't done it personally, but probably throughout this first funding round, it it wouldn't have been such a good idea. Uh,
I'm just
but
from a longitudinal perspective, I'm just saying selfishly, it would be really interesting as someone who enjoys that type of data and the story that you can tell
yeah,
and kind of going into sort of this next segment, which is really around, your funding and investment, because securing funding can oftentimes be one of the greatest challenges for startups. And can you maybe share some insights or strategies that worked for you in
yes,
securing the initial investment for Reminded?
yes. Based on my own personal experience, and please, I still want to say also that we have a long journey ahead of us before
Of
we
course.
consider ourselves to be successful. I can't see that like securing any funding will solidify your success whatsoever, but it's a step on the way, of course. But anyways, some things that I've noticed that goes truly like unnoticed and doesn't like get enough attention is the mental game that you have to play with yourself if you do choose to fundraise, because that inner conversation will lead you in either direction quite quickly, and that will be reflected into every single conversation that you go into as well. So
Right.
what you tell yourself on a daily basis will affect your possibility of securing down some checks. And I would say that some one like mental strategy that I try to convince myself is like, why should I entertain a scenario that I don't want to become true? Because the only way that I see is that we're gonna go in that right direction. So why put myself through that mental turmoil? Because then I will fall into a pile of sadness for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and this thing is something that I would wish that I would have known and learned myself earlier. So these kinds of like mental patterns.
Better sometime than no time. And it sounds
Yes.
like what you're saying is that oftentimes we're sharing stories, we're sharing a vision of what the future can look like when receiving funding and what the startup is going to do. And it sounds like what you mentioned is that oftentimes the most important story is the story that we tell ourselves
Yeah,
and the story that's playing through your mind. That's really deep. And the fact that
indeed.
you've been able to figure this out early on is a really healthy thing, not only
Mm.
for you, also for the health of the company.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say that that lingers out in the startups like culture as well, and how you approach people when the conditions aren't the best. And do you let your emotions take over and lash it out on other people, or can you detach yourself from that current situation and not project it onto others because they haven't done anything, and you have to just
Right.
see that kind of perspective. So, but it's tough. It's definitely not easy.
Yeah.
But you just have to see it from the bigger picture, I guess. So,
Well, since you mentioned culture, what is the culture like at Reminded, and what do you want it to be long term?
I have set a few main things in place for us, which I think have helped significantly and lingered throughout our journey so far, which is be prepared to execute still under immense pressure, encourage each other through the ups and downs, um, highlight the small wins on a daily and weekly basis, open, honest, and frequent communication, and strive towards excellence and tapping into a greater version of yourself every single day.
That's fantastic. And this is just for my own entertainment. If you could have maybe even just a 1 hour mentorship session meeting with any innovator from the past, who would it be and what would you discuss?
Hmm.
From the past or the present, rather.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a like generic answer, but based on like all the mental concepts that I've heard from him and how he was able to also execute on a superior level like Steve Jobs, I think is one of the people that I would have loved to have like a longer conversation with in terms of some learnings that he had throughout his innovative journey within the space of tech. So
Really cool. And as our community sort of sits, it's always important that we take action. And your main focus is around execution, doing that under pressure. What's one thing that someone can take from this conversation and apply? What's your one thing that you would say to someone?
you will never be ready to start. Um, I think a lot of people have to have the degree under their arm, read X amount of articles to start, create a substantial big network around them, or find a mentor before they can initiate on something that they truly resonate with. But that's a very false premise. When you're starting out for the first time to build something totally new, you will feel a lot of doubt and question your direction and if you're even able or capable of doing this. And then you know that you're on the right path, which is very paradoxical, but that's how it is actually. So I would say that that's the advice that I would have to someone, that you will never feel ready. So might as well do it now.
Annika, I have to say that you are wise beyond your years. Lots and lots of wisdom that you shared today. Just want to say thanks for being able to come on, share a little bit of the journey. Obviously, we're still early on. However, it's important to be able to provide that level of access to those that are on their journey, at least for me, for you can share. And you're always welcome to come back. So for those that have tuned in today, if you found this conversation to be particularly helpful for you, and quite frankly, I found it very helpful for me, would you mind just sharing it on your social media? A like, a comment, something. It goes a long way. And when we kind of collectively are working together, rowing in the same direction, it does make a difference to move healthcare forward. So, Annika, looking forward to future conversations and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. This was really great. And yeah, I love the whole community that you have built around here and the message that you put out. So
Awesome.
it's these kinds of like personal stories that need to be highlighted so much more. So
Amazing. Well, I'll see you soon.
yes, thank you.